Welcome to the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast. Today we are talking about what to do when you forget the law on the bar exam as part of our Quick Tips series. Your Bar Exam Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan and Lee Burgess, that's me. We're here to demystify the bar exam experience so you can study effectively, stay sane, and hopefully pass and move on with your life. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. Alison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review on your favorite listening app and check out our sister podcast, the Law School Toolbox podcast. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on barexamtoolbox.com, and we love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started. Welcome back. Today, we're talking about what seems to be everyone's biggest fear on the bar exam, and that's forgetting the law. There are 7 subjects tested on the multi-state bar exam. And in addition to those 7 subjects, another 5 subjects are also fair game to be tested on the multi-state essay exam. And considering the number of rules each subject has, that's a lot of law. And it's unrealistic to retain every rule that could possibly be tested on the exam. That's the rationale behind prioritizing the most commonly tested rules. If you're only going to retain a certain percentage of what you study, you want to make sure that a topic tested every single year is included in what you remember. But what do you do on test day when you realize that the essay is trying to test you on what duty of care you owe to the anticipated trespasser that gets injured in your backyard, but you just don't remember the rule for those pesky anticipated trespassers? Or you realize that the essay is trying to test you on the excited utterance hearsay exception, but all you can think about is how you don't want your essay to read like an excited utterance. Well, the first and most important tip is to breathe. Do not panic. People still do incredibly well on the bar exam despite making up a rule or two. Now, of course, your goal while studying is to minimize the chances of this happening. But on exam day, your goal is to pass the bar exam, and making up law to apply to the facts given will get you closer to a passing score than skipping a question will. And writing a strong application will get you even closer than you might think. Okay, so after you've taken a quick breath, the next thing you want to do is determine what the essay is trying to test you on, and the facts will guide you here. If you've got a torts question with explosives, then you'll probably want to start thinking of a rule for abnormally dangerous activities. If there's a constitutional law question with a statute distinguishing on the basis of race, gear up to create a rule for strict scrutiny. Knowing the issue is half the battle. If you know the issue and make up the rule, you'll be able to apply your rule to the facts given and still write a successful answer. This is where outlining essay answers at the beginning of your bar study can be helpful. To outline an essay answer, you use the facts to identify what topics, rules, and exceptions an essay is testing you on. And that's exactly what you'll need to do if you forget the law on exam day. The only difference is that if you can't remember the specifics of the rule, well, you make it up. Now, one tip for making up the law is to get as close to the actual rule as you possibly can. If you remember that the rule has 3 factors, well then make up a 3-factor rule. If you remember the rule but feel like there's an important exception you're not remembering, make up an exception. So let's say you remember that in order to establish diversity jurisdiction, there must be complete diversity of citizenship and some dollar amount that has completely left your brain because the person next to you won't stop tapping their pencil. Now do not sweat it. Just make up the dollar amount. Discuss whether the facts satisfy your requirements for diversity jurisdiction and come to the conclusion that logically follows from your analysis. The majority of the points will come from the analysis, so it's important that you get to it, even without the perfect rule. Now that said, please remember that the amount in controversy must exceed $75,000 for diversity jurisdiction. When trying to get close to the actual rule, This is another place where you can let the facts guide you. It's not often that bar examiners include many facts with absolutely no legal significance. So if you are able to apply most of the facts to the rule you created, you probably aren't too far off from the rule the examiners were trying to test. Let the facts guide you to a reasonably made-up rule and hopefully a passing score. Another tip for making up a rule is to not stray from the perfect IRAC or CRAC formatting you've been practicing. If you're going to make up the rule, it's important that you have a coherent answer that is easy to follow, and the best way to ensure a coherent answer is through a well-structured essay. This is another reason why it's important to take a breath once you've realized that you've forgotten a rule. It's tough to write well when you're in a state of panic. So try to stay calm and organize the essay exactly as you would if you had remembered the rule. Don't let the organization of your essay be what tips a grader off to your panic over forgetting a rule. Now, I know that asking you to stay calm when you're forgetting the law is a tall order, but what do we do when we want to get better at something? Well, we practice. We've said this before in another episode, but it is important enough to repeat. Don't let the first time you're making up the law be on exam day. While you're doing practice essays, if you come across a rule that you haven't yet reviewed, keep that book closed. Take that as your opportunity to practice making up the law so that you can do it comfortably and efficiently if you have to do so on test day. And then, of course, go back and review the rule you couldn't remember because you won't be forgetting that one again. Although it's a good idea to practice making up the law, your best defense against forgetting the law is to actively study for the recommended amount of time, which is typically no less than around 400 hours. And you'll also want to incorporate memorization techniques, such as spaced repetition, into your approach to studying. We've discussed that method before, but to refresh your memory, spaced repetition is reviewing material at timed intervals to maximize memory retention. Now, I've said it a few times how important it is to stay calm. So the final tip to forgetting the law is to identify ahead of time what practice is effective in keeping you calm. Try deep breaths or a sip of water, if you're allowed to have water in the exam room. Try anything that you think will regulate your nervous system and keep you cool enough to continue effective test taking. And by identifying this ahead of time, you don't lose time on exam day trying to figure out what calms you down. Plan now for anything that may happen on exam day and be ready to overcome it. And although the goal is to retain as much as you can, by exam day, you'll do just fine at making up the law if you have to and keep calm through the storm. Now, before we finish up, one final story. You might find it hard to believe, but I made up a big chunk of law on my bar exam. It was the second essay on constitutional law, and honestly, I don't think the law was even in the outline from the bar review company. I remember the feeling of panic as I got to the bottom of the question and went, I have no idea what to do here. But I took a breath and I started outlining an answer. I figured out what I did know and what I didn't. And for what I didn't know, I came up with some law that sounded really convincing. There were reasonableness tests. It was great law. I'm sure, in my memory. And then I wrote out a complete answer, arguing plenty of facts and coming to conclusions. Now, I have never seen that answer once I wrote it, and you want to know why? Because I passed the bar exam, and in California, you never get your exam or your scores if you pass. Was that a tricky hour of my life? You get an hour for each essay on the California bar. Well, you bet. Do I still remember it in details over a decade later? Well, sure I do. But I still got enough down on the page to collect enough points to pass. Most bar takers will admit that they have to make up some law on their exam. It happens. It's okay. Just make the best of a tough exam moment and use the skills you have practiced to get through it. Well, with that, we're out of time. If you enjoyed this episode of the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on your favorite listening app. We would really appreciate it, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee or Alison at lee@barexamtoolbox.com or allison@barexamtoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form on barexamtoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.